The bundled up heap of parts you see in front of you are part of a project that's been ongoing for about, I'm going to say, a year and a half, getting close to 2 years, unfortunately. It's a huge mess of arcade parts that I've been looking to build into an arcade controller for the sole purpose of playing classic games on MAME, NES, Super NES, Genesis, PC Engine, Commodore, you name it. The idea is to have this be how to play it. Eventually I got my stream up and I was thinking, wouldn't it be awesome if I played all of my games on my stream with this controller? Well, that's just it's part of the problem. The controller has yet to be made, and it's gotten to the point where I'm going to have to ask you guys to help me out in terms of how to properly build this thing, because I'm still trying to figure out what the hell kind of design to go with. Do I go with an ergonomic design, or should I just lay it all out like a grid? Plus, what the hell kind of material am I going to use? After much consideration, it's been ultimately decided that this steel material is just out of the question. It's not going to work. Despite the fact that it would look really, really awesome if that was how the controller was made, it's just unfeasible. It'd be really hard to drill right through the steel, not to mention these diamond bits. I don't even know what these things are called. Rivets? Whatever. It'd be really hard to drill through it and make it work, essentially. Now, you may have noticed there's two controllers laying here. One of course being the first player, and the other. I was hoping to be able to get a second person onto the stream, like just sitting next to me, and we could do two-player games. We could do versus games, mostly two-player arcade games. That was the whole purpose. But NES games, that could be done too. There are a couple of good two-player NES games around, as well as some Super NES and Genesis games that are also good with multiple players. Now, as you may have noticed, there's two sets of bags here. One is, of course, the one for player 1, and this one, obviously, for player 2. If you look really close, you can see the two-player start button. And if you listen really closely, it makes a clicky sound. People like that for some reason. I don't know why. But I'm going to go ahead and stop the tape and assemble the first configuration that I had in mind. Now here's the first layout that I have originally conceived for the controller, and where I decided, you know what, this is how I'm going to spend the money and get the parts. I want to set up a two-player control panel, each with about 11 buttons. Obviously, you have the standard 6-button layout for fighting games like Street Fighter, Killer Instinct, Mortal Kombat, that kind of thing. And then there's 3 additional buttons on the top that I wanted to use for programmable combos, special moves, and the like. And of course, at the very top, you have your standard player 1 and player 2 start buttons. And service buttons. Yeah, that's what these tiny little buttons are for. Mostly for service mode and that kind of thing, which normally you would put underneath the arcade cabinet. Ooh, pardon me. You would put them underneath the arcade cabinet so that you can trigger credits and additional game options, just stuff you would not be able to normally get by pressing down on the panel itself. you would obviously have to open it up and press a button inside to access the hidden options. Now this is it's an IL Joystick. It's supposedly the most sturdiest joystick in the world. Don't know about how accurate though. I've never played. I don't remember playing an arcade game that had this style of joystick. But it's got the standard micro switches. I think they're cherry. Not quite sure. I just know that it makes that clicky sound that everybody's familiar with when you move in a certain direction. The only downside to this kind of configuration is that you would have the hands so close together when trying to perform special maneuvers. I don't know if it would be feasible for two players to huddle around this space, and I was hoping that I could maybe get a 25 to 30 foot wide space to work with. Unfortunately, I don't know if my desk has enough room for that kind of thing. It's still one of those wait and see kind of things. Another problem I've got is that these are of course the short leaf variations of the classic buttons. I did kind of make a goof when I bought them, because I had no idea that I would need all the additional parts in order to be able to screw the buttons into place. I mean, you can't just drill them into the. You can't just put them inside the structure and expect it to be able to perform actions whenever you press the button down. You have to have a specialized switcher, as you can see here. Let me go ahead and zoom in on this thing. Not sure if that light is either hurting it or helping it, but essentially, when you press down, it creates the contact points which allow input to be registered. Now try to imagine all of these being connected somehow. As you can see on this side, it's barely even conceivable that all 9 buttons, I was going to say 6, that all 9 buttons could be represented. There's barely enough room after all the micro switches have been put into place. There's barely enough room for the final 3 buttons plus the service mode and player 2 start buttons. So I'm kind of concerned as to how this project would work. So I'm looking into other options. Okay, this is design number 2, which is based on the Neo Geo layout of their arcade cabinets. Obviously, you have the standard red, yellow, green, and blue buttons, and with the second layer on top, kind of similar, but not really. Obviously, the yellow buttons have been removed, which is kind of a waste because I bought all 9 buttons, but it does leave a little more breathing room in terms of getting all these in place. And as you can tell, I have went ahead and assembled all of the buttons to how they would look if all the micro switches have been set into place. Obviously, it does leave a lot more breathing room in terms of deepness, but hopefully I can get a wider piece of material to work with in terms of getting the spacing all properly. Unfortunately, even if we get all the buttons into place and the joysticks into place and the start and service buttons into place, there's still the issue of actually mounting the buttons to the structure. We have these special hex nuts that have to be mounted in order to keep the buttons from flying out. Like, for example, if I pick up this micro switch, like for example turning over the arcade controller, that button will fall out. We don't want that, especially if I were to, say, bring it to a meetup. It needs to be mounted into place with a special hex nut, like so. I'm not sure if you can see that, but it's mounted in between the micro switch and the contact itself. And now I'm screwing it into place. And it needs to be set in a way to where the top of the structure has to be in between the button and the micro switch, so that if the controller were turned over, it would not fall out of place. Now luckily, the player 1 and player 2 start buttons are already rigged in such a way, because they already have their own hex nut, which has an awful lot of breathing room. I mean, you could pretty much put it in between a piece of car metal or something and it would still fit into place. You just have to screw it toward the top and there you go. It's not coming loose. It's wired into the micro switch. I wish all buttons were like that, especially the concave design buttons. Last but not least, all of the buttons and all of the switches have to be able to be wired into this control module, which I got from Paradise Arcade. It's exactly as it looks. It's a programmable PCB to which you plug in all of the buttons, all of the joysticks. It supports up to, well, exactly this amount of buttons, that amount of inputs. About 32 inputs, which include player 1 and player 2 movements, and about 16 buttons each, I think. Yeah, according to this diagram, it uses exactly 32 inputs for both players. So I managed to get exactly the right amount of buttons, including the ones that will most likely never be used. It's just the problem of how to wire them all in properly. And unfortunately, I still haven't quite figured out how exactly they are to be wired. It's kind of hard to find documentation on how exactly these things wire into a joystick, or to a button for that matter. Because if you look at the end, it's kind of hard to display, but there is in fact 3 different connector pins. As you can see, there's 3 contact pins on the side of each side of the joystick. 2 of them on the end, I have no idea what they're for. I also don't know what this one here on the end is. And I can't seem to find any documentation on how to properly wire that in. One is, of course, the data input, and the other is ground for transmitting power. Unfortunately, it does not explain this. Does it matter what is data and what is ground? As you can see, there's 2 different ends, and yes, I realize that's out of focus somehow, but you could just barely make it out. I mean, there's 2 different prongs. One's for data, one's for power. I just don't know what goes into what, and I can't find anything on the internet as to how to properly wire it in. But yeah, there's the two. That's the two designs I have in mind for how I'm going to go about wiring the arcade board, and hopefully I'll have this thing built by the time of the 2013 meetup, which of course the name has yet to be determined, but that is the two different designs I have in mind for the controller. I'm hoping to have this thing put together in time for the meetup in June, in mid to somewhere around mid-June. I'd like to show it off for everybody at the meetup. It's just a matter of getting the damn thing built and set to where it could be used. So yeah, if you can offer any input on how to properly build this, like what kind of materials you would recommend, how to somehow fit a nut and bolt in between and somehow get it to still connect the contact points, on the button, please let me know, because I would really like to get this thing done finally after almost 2 years of this thing sitting beside me and hopefully not gathering dust. I've been trying to keep it covered the whole time, but yeah. So yeah, please message me on the forums or in the comments section. Please, I need help. I want to get this thing built.